Hello, this is Rachel Ariana, and thank you so much for watching my video today. Today, I made my husband a keto-friendly cheesecake. Back in October, my husband was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and it was so serious he went into the emergency room and had to take insulin shots to get his blood sugar under control. His blood sugar was up in the 500s at the time of his type 2 diabetes diagnosis. We had no idea he had type 2 diabetes until he his body just finally could not handle it any longer, and his pancreas couldn't handle the amount of carbs and sugar and unhealthy things going into his body, and his blood sugar shot up to 500. So with that being said, he did much research and realized a keto diet would be excellent for someone with type 2 diabetes as a way of keeping his blood sugar under control, as well as possibly even reversing the diabetes. And in a few short months, he was diagnosed in October, we're now in March, and he's pre-diabetic at this point. He has definitely brought his blood sugar under control, and he has lost a significant amount of weight doing keto. So with that being said, of course, he is always, and as well as myself, always on the lookout for keto-friendly recipes. And since he's diabetic, he can't enjoy sugar or desserts like he used to, but he definitely can eat a keto-friendly cheesecake, and that's what I made today. So if you're somebody with type 2 diabetes, or if you're somebody who is on a keto diet, or if you're somebody that just wants to eat healthy and want an alternative to a traditional cheesecake, then continue on. Okay, the first thing that I did is I went ahead and I turned on the oven. The recipe called for the oven to be set to 350 degrees. So as I'm going to be mixing up all of the ingredients, I want to go ahead and let the oven begin to preheat. Next, I'm taking a baking sheet and I'm going to fill it up with water. I'm going to put the baking sheet on the bottom rack underneath where the cheesecake will be cooking. Cheesecakes need to have a humid environment in which they're cooking to keep them from cracking. You don't need to use a cookie sheet or a baking sheet. You can also use a regular cooking pan or cooking dish of some sort. I chose the cookie baking sheet because I wanted to have the humidity or the steam distribute through the oven evenly. Here you can see me trying to take that baking sheet full of water and put it in the oven, but of course the water started moving in waves as I was moving, which made it really, really difficult. So learn from my mistake, put the baking sheet, if you choose to use a baking sheet and not a baking dish, on the bottom rack, and then fill up the baking sheet with water just using a pitcher. Okay, so here are all the ingredients and supplies that I need to create this keto-friendly cheesecake for my husband. This is the recipe that I'm using. I will link it below. I'm gonna make some adaptations or adaptions, sorry, to this recipe. So, for example, where it says 1 tablespoon lemon juice, and it says it's optional, I'm gonna go ahead and actually add coconut extract to that. So that's what I'm gonna do in place of that. Then the other thing that I'm gonna do to make a slight change is here for the crust. It says to use 4 to 6 tablespoons melted coconut oil or enough water to make it slightly sticky. I'm actually gonna go ahead and use butter for that. I'm gonna use 6 tablespoons of butter. Butter is actually keto friendly. There's 0 carbs in it, and it's important to have fat in the diet. So that's what I'm gonna do here. Also, I'm gonna use this as well because butter just makes things taste really good. It just does. Okay, so this is everything I have. This is the 9-inch Springform pan here that I'm using. Vanilla extract, which is what the recipe calls for. Obviously the cream cheese, this is exactly the 24 ounces that it's calling for. I'm gonna use this Greek yogurt non-fat plain in place of what it says here. It says 2 cups yogurt, such as coconut milk yogurt. So I think it's okay to use this, but I couldn't find coconut milk yogurt specifically. So that's why I'm kind of going to be replacing this with the coconut. So I'm hoping it'll taste good. I will let you know. This is my first time actually making this recipe for my husband. All right, and I'm gonna go ahead and be using our food processor to put this all together. So I think I have everything that we need. I have my measuring cups, my measuring spoon. This is a tablespoon, additional smaller little measuring cups, and so on. Another measuring spoon, another little measuring cup. Almond flour for the crust, which it calls for, but also within the cream cheese recipe, as well as this plant-based sugar alternative to actual sugar. And of course there's 0 calories, 0 sugar. It even says here keto friendly. And just wanted to show you in the back, 0 calories. Okay, first I'm gonna go ahead and make the crust. I have a bowl to mix the butter and the almond flour in. I got a 1 cup measuring cup. That's basically 1 cup. It calls for 2 cups of the almond flour. I found it just much easier to use an actual cup such as this to get the flour and put it into the bowl. Now I'm going to take my 6 tablespoons of butter and I'm going to melt it in the microwave to put it in my crust. Using a fork to mix the butter into the flour. I like to use a fork because it helps to sift the flour through the prongs of the fork without too much of the flour sticking to the fork. That the flour is all sticky and the butter has been distributed throughout it, I'm going to pour it into my 9-inch Springform pan and spread it out and press it down. The crust is ready to go. I'm going to set it aside and now work on the actual cream cheese portion of the cake, or the cheesecake part of the cake. So I'm going to take my cream cheese, 24 ounces, and place it into my food processor. Next, I am measuring out my yogurt. It requires 2 cups for this recipe. I'm using the 1 cup measuring cup there, and then of course I'll dump that into my food processor, and then I'll measure out a 2nd cup. Now I'm adding the 2½ teaspoons of the pure vanilla extract. This recipe calls for 1 tablespoon lemon juice, but I decided to put coconut extract instead. So here I am going ahead and I'm going to put 1 tablespoon of coconut extract into the food processor. Now I'm putting 1/4 cup of almond flour into the mix. I'm going to go ahead and add in my sugar substitute, and it requires 2/3 of a cup. Now time to mix it all together. Now it's time to place our filling onto the crust. And just a side note, I forgot to put down parchment paper underneath my crust in the Springform pan. I really suggest you do that, because once it cooked and I cut this cheesecake, which was delicious, by the way, and my husband loved, obviously the crust stuck to the bottom of the Springform pan. So the recipe does call for that, but I just totally spaced that part out. So when you create this, if you choose to do this recipe, don't forget to put parchment paper in the pan, so that way the crust does not stick to the pan when it comes time to cut your cake. Time to place the cheesecake into the oven to cook. This recipe said to cook the cheesecake for about 30 minutes, but to be honest, I don't know why it said to cook it for such a short amount of time. I ended up doubling that, and I cooked this cheesecake for 60 minutes, for a good hour, and then I let it sit in the oven for another 20 minutes when it was done, and it ended up being perfect. So you'll see me do 30 minutes to start, but then I went back and did 60. And there you have it, a beautifully cooked cheesecake. I was actually quite proud of myself, since this was the first time I've ever baked cheesecake before, and it turned out great. Thank you so much for watching the video to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. I would really appreciate it if you would give me a like and subscribe, and I will see you again in another random recording. Bye.